It started with something small, a warning note tucked under my door, signed only with HOA management. I thought it was a mistake, but then the letters kept coming. Petty fines for unapproved grass height, threats about community standards, and neighbors whispering every time I stepped outside. Within weeks, my peaceful home turned into a battleground. The HOA claimed to protect property values, but what they really wanted was control. When they crossed the line and messed with my yard, the one place that was mine, I realized they'd picked the wrong homeowner to push around. What happens when you fight back against people who think they own your neighborhood? Keep watching. You're about to find out. When I first moved into Maplewood Estates, it felt like a dream come true. The lawns were perfectly trimmed. The houses lined up like something out of a magazine. And every evening, the golden sunlight made the whole street glow. It was quiet, orderly, safe, the kind of place people worked their whole lives to call home. My wife and I had spent years saving for it, imagining weekend barbecues, quiet mornings on the porch, and kids riding bikes down the cul-de-sac. For a while, that dream felt real. Neighbors waved when we drove by, and the HOA president, Karen, yes. That kind of Karen welcomed us with a bright smile and a thick binder labeled community guidelines. She called it helpful. I called it intense. But back then, I didn't think much of it. Every neighborhood has rules, right? The first few months were peaceful. I mowed the lawn every weekend, planted roses along the fence, and even joined a community cleanup day to get involved. But it didn't take long to notice something off. Karen seemed to watch everything. If a car was parked slightly crooked, she'd post about it in the neighborhood group. If someone left their trash can out a little too long, there'd be a friendly reminder email by morning. It was annoying, but harmless, until she started taking an interest in my yard. One morning, found a note taped to my mailbox. Your lawn edging does not meet HOA specifications. I laughed it off. But then another came, this time about the color of my garden mulch. Then one about non-conforming bird feeders. The petty notices piled up, each one more ridiculous than the last. At first, I thought it was random enforcement. Maybe a mistake. Maybe a new policy. But as I watched her chat and smile with my neighbors, something became clear. She wasn't enforcing the rules. She was targeting me. Still, I tried to stay calm. I fixed what I could, ignored what I couldn't, and told myself it would blow over. But deep down, I could feel the shift. Every time I looked out the window, I saw her walking her little dog past my house, pausing just long enough to take photos. Every morning, I braced myself before checking the mailbox. That's when I realized something I'd never noticed before. The HOA wasn't just about rules, it was about control. And the people who ran it didn't like being told no. I didn't know it yet, but that first note, that tiny, harmless-looking piece of paper, was the spark that would set everything in motion. It started small, a few letters here and there, the kind you shrug off and toss into a drawer. But with Karen, the HOA president, nothing stayed small for long. The first fine was for my grass being slightly uneven, $10. Then came another $25 for unauthorized lawn edging. I stared at the notice, confused. I'd used standard metal edging, the same kind half the neighborhood had. But when I walked down the street to check, something clicked. My edging was silver. Everyone else's. Black petty. Trivial, but apparently, a violation. I painted it black that weekend, thinking that would be the end of it. It'll be following week. I received a warning about decorative clutter, my small garden gnome that my daughter had given me for Father's Day. The letter called it a potential safety hazard. I laughed until I saw Karen snapping pictures of it from the sidewalk. That was the moment something inside me shifted. I'd tried to be cooperative. I'd followed every rule, paid every minor fine, and stayed polite. But it became clear this wasn't about rules. It was personal. Within a month, the notices turned into full-on harassment. My mailbox filled with friendly reminders about trash can placement, leaf collection, and driveway cleanliness. At one point, I was fined because a leaf blower had left a dust trail across the curb. I kid you not, $50 for curb debris. Every time I fixed one thing, she found another. And it wasn't just the letters. I began noticing small, unsettling things. Car parked across the street at odd hours, lights off, engine running. My trash cans mysteriously moved halfway down the driveway after I'd placed them neatly by the curb. Even my mail came opened a few times, though I could never prove it. The tension wasn't just in my yard anymore. It crept into my home. My wife started avoiding the porch. My kids whispered when they saw Karen's little dog trotting past, leash tight in her hand, eyes darting toward our property. One night, I checked the HOA's online portal, just to see if I was imagining things. I wasn't. There were notes, internal memos logged against my property. Non-compliant, edging. Potential nuisance. Each entry signed off with Karen's initials. That's when I started keeping records of my own. Every notice.
Every photo.
Every timestamp. I logged it all. At first, it was just to protect myself. A paper trail. Just in case. But deep down, I knew I was preparing for something bigger. Then came the sprinkler incident. It was mid-July, hot and dry. I just replaced my sprinkler system, new heads, new timer, to keep the grass from drying out. A few days later, I woke up to find my front yard flooded. The sprinkler box had been tampered with, the dial snapped clean off. Someone had done it intentionally. That same afternoon, I received another letter. Property damage due to homeowner negligence. Immediate repair required. I saw red. I stormed over to the HOA office. Really just a repurposed garage at Karen's house, and demanded to speak with her. She smiled the moment she opened the door. That fake, saccharine smile that said she'd been expecting me. "I'm sorry," she said sweetly. "The rules are the rules. Maybe next time you'll follow them." I walked away that day knowing there was no reasoning with her. That weekend, I installed cameras. Small, discreet, motion-activated ones around my yard. I didn't tell anyone, not even my family. And sure enough, within 3 days, the footage caught her. Karen, sneaking onto my property early in the morning, measuring the distance between my mailbox and the curb with a tape measure. Then again that evening, bending down near the sprinkler box. That was my breaking point. I thought about going straight to the police, but something told me to wait. To be smart, if I acted too soon, she'd twist it around, claim I was harassing her. The HOA board was practically her fan club. I needed more than proof. I needed impact. Then the HOA held their quarterly community review meeting, open to all residents. That's when I realized this was my chance. Before the meeting, I made copies of every letter, every fine, every time-stamped photo from my cameras. I compiled it all into a neat binder, labeling each section like an investigator building a case file. And at the very back, I slipped in a still shot of Karen crouched over my sprinkler box, screwdriver in hand. The night of the meeting, I showed up early. The air was thick, summer humidity mixed with tension. Karen stood at the front of the room, clipboard in hand, greeting people like she was the mayor. She even gave me a little wave. As the meeting went on, she did her usual speech: community pride, rule enforcement, property values, blah, blah, blah. But halfway through, when she started talking about chronic violators bringing down neighborhood standards, I raised my hand. She hesitated, clearly annoyed, but trying to keep her composure. "Yes, Mr. Davis." I stood. "I'd like to discuss these so-called violations." She smiled, that tight, patronizing grin. "Of course. Please keep it brief." I didn't. I opened the binder and began reading calmly at first. Date, violation, fine, correction, over and over. Every petty infraction, every ridiculous rule. People started murmuring. Then I reached the photos. "Here," I said, flipping to the still image. "This was taken last Tuesday at 6:47 a.m. That's you, isn't it, Karen?" The room went silent. You could hear the hum of the air conditioner. Her face turned white, then red. She stammered something about inspection rights, but the board members were already whispering among themselves. Then I played the clip. 10 seconds of clear footage, her on my property, unscrewing the sprinkler control. It was over in an instant. The room erupted. One board member called it inexcusable. Another asked if I'd contacted law enforcement. I didn't have to. The video spoke for itself. Karen stormed out before the meeting even ended. But if I thought that was the end of it, I was wrong. The next morning I found a letter, not from the HOA this time, but from Karen herself. No header, no signature, just a single sheet of paper slid under my door. "You don't know what you started," it read. For a few days, things went quiet. The fines stopped. The whispers faded. Neighbors started waving again. For the first time in months, I thought maybe, just maybe, I'd won. Then, one evening, my security camera alert went off again. Movement in the yard. I checked the feed, and my stomach dropped. It wasn't Karen this time. It was a man I didn't recognize, walking along the edge of my property with a clipboard, taking notes. He wasn't wearing any HOA gear, just casual clothes and a smirk. When I stepped outside, he got in his car and drove off. The next morning, I got an email from the HOA board, pending property review, apparently. A new compliance officer had been appointed to handle ongoing neighborhood concerns. I knew exactly what that meant. Karen was out, but her influence wasn't. She'd just shifted tactics, fighting from the shadows. So I doubled down. I upgraded my cameras, installed floodlights, and filed a formal complaint with the county housing department. I knew it would take weeks for them to investigate, but that was fine. I wasn't just reacting anymore, I was planning. I stopped hiding what I was doing. I trimmed my lawn during the day, loud and proud. I invited neighbors over, told them everything. A few were shocked. One even admitted she'd gotten similar anonymous fines in the past, but had been too scared to speak up. Little by little, the story spread. The neighborhood that once whispered about me started whispering about her. And when the county finally sent an investigator to audit the HOA's financial records, after multiple resident complaints, things started to unravel fast. Unpaid reimbursements, unauthorized fines, even maintenance fees that no one could account for. Karen's perfect little empire was cracking. And through it all, I stayed quiet, calm, patient, because I knew the best revenge wasn't yelling, or fighting, or even proving her wrong. It was letting her destroy herself with the very rules she used to control everyone else. And as the investigation closed in, she had no idea the final surprise waiting for her, one she'd never forget. The letter came on a Thursday morning, the kind of morning that already felt heavy before you even checked the mail. A plain white envelope, no return address, just my name typed neatly across the front. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Notice of violation. Unauthorized yard modifications. Final warning before legal action. I actually laughed out loud. After everything Karen and her cronies had pulled, now they were threatening me? But as I read the rest of the letter, the laugh caught in my throat. It wasn't signed by Karen this time. It was signed by Interim HOA Compliance Committee, a new group she'd apparently formed, conveniently stacked with her friends. And attached to the letter was a photo of my yard, taken at night. That's when it hit me. They were still watching. The investigation had clearly shaken them, but Karen wasn't giving up. She was trying to bury me under one last avalanche of fines and threats, hoping I'd cave before the county finished their audit. But this time, I wasn't the one on defense. That weekend, the county investigator, a quiet, no-nonsense man named Alvarez, came by for a follow-up interview. I showed him everything, the binder, the videos, the new letter. He took notes silently, occasionally shaking his head. When I finished, he said something I'll never forget. "Mr. Davis, I think it's time you come to next week's HOA hearing." I frowned. "They won't let me speak." "Oh," he said, sliding a document across the table. "They will now." It was an official summons. The county had found serious irregularities in the HOA's records, enough to require an open hearing. With all parties present, for the first time I wasn't just a frustrated homeowner. I was a witness. The night of the hearing, the community hall was packed. People who'd never attended a single HOA meeting before suddenly showed up, whispering and speculating. Word had spread fast that there were accusations of fraud, that Karen's leadership was under review, that something big was about to happen. I sat near the back, binder in hand, trying to keep my breathing steady. At the front table, Karen sat flanked by two board members, both looking nervous. She looked different tonight. The confident posture was gone, replaced by tight shoulders and darting eyes. The meeting started as usual, procedural nonsense, budget items, landscaping updates, but the tension was thick enough to cut. Then, finally, Alvarez stepped forward, a stack of files under his arm. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice calm but firm, "our office has completed a preliminary review of the Maplewood Estates HOA's financial and procedural practices." He paused, letting the silence settle. "What we found raises serious concerns." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Karen's smile twitched. Alvarez continued, laying out each point methodically. Unauthorized fines, unrecorded transactions, reimbursement checks written to board members for miscellaneous services. Psst. Every few sentences, someone gasped or whispered. Then he turned toward me. "Mr. Davis, could you please stand?" My heart pounded as I rose. "This homeowner," Alvarez said, "has been the target of multiple baseless violations over the past year, several of which appear to have been fabricated or exaggerated by the HOA president herself." Karen slammed her pen down. "That's ridiculous," she snapped. "He's been non-compliant since," Alvarez held up a hand. "Miss Thompson, we have photographic and video evidence. You were recorded entering his property without authorization on multiple occasions." The room went dead silent. He handed copies of the footage to the board. I watched as they flipped through the pages, their expressions shifting from confusion to horror. One board member whispered something to another, shaking his head. Karen's face drained of color. "This is harassment," she hissed. "He's twisting enough," Alvarez said, his tone sharp now. "We also discovered HOA funds misused for personal landscaping services, invoices linked to your address." The collective gasp that followed sounded like a wave crashing. Karen opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her hands trembled as she tried to gather her papers. For months I'd imagined this moment, the reckoning, the truth spilling out in front of everyone. But seeing it happen was surreal. She wasn't the untouchable queen of the neighborhood anymore. She was just a person caught in her own web of control and greed. The board members began whispering frantically, clearly panicking. One of them, a man named Peter, who'd always seemed uneasy around Karen, finally spoke up. "I think," he said carefully, "we need to call for an immediate suspension of her authority pending full review." Karen spun toward him. "You can't do this. I built this community." But it was too late. The motion was seconded, then voted on, right there in front of everyone. 3 hands went up the majority. Alvarez nodded. "Effective immediately? Miss Thompson, you are relieved of all HOA duties until further notice." The room erupted. Some clapped. Others just sat in stunned silence. I stood frozen, my binder still in my hand, watching as the woman who'd made my life miserable for months was stripped of her power in real time. Karen gathered her things in silence, her eyes fixed on me. For a second I thought she might say something, an apology, a threat, anything. But she didn't. She just turned and walked out, the click of her heels echoing off the floor. The next few days were a blur. The HOA scrambled to appoint an interim committee. Alvarez and his team continued their investigation. And rumors spread that Karen could face civil penalties for mismanagement of funds. Neighbors I barely knew came by to thank me. One even brought cookies, saying she'd been fined hundreds for a non-conforming mailbox years ago but was too scared to fight it. For the first time, the neighborhood felt normal. People talked again, laughed again. But for me, the calm didn't feel like victory. Not yet. I kept thinking about that letter Karen had left under my door. "You don't know what you've started." Was it a threat? A warning? One night, about a week later, I found out. I was out in the yard, trimming the hedges, when I saw headlights creeping down the street. A silver SUV. It slowed as it passed my house, then stopped just beyond the driveway. I couldn't see the driver through the tinted glass, but I knew. She rolled down the window halfway, just long enough for me to see her eyes, tired, angry, but still defiant. For a long second, neither of us moved. Then, without a word, she drove off. It was over. Or at least that's what I told myself. But that night, as I sat on the porch watching the sprinklers sweep across the lawn, the same lawn that had started this whole mess, I couldn't shake the thought that maybe this wasn't just about Karen. Maybe it was about something deeper. About how power, once given, can twist people. How neighborhoods built on control forget what community really means. Asterisk. The grass glistened in the streetlights, and for the first time in months I let out a breath that felt like freedom. Still, as the water shimmered in the dark, I couldn't help but wonder how many other Karens were out there watching, waiting, hiding behind the word rules. And if one of them came after me again, would I be ready? After that night, the neighborhood felt eerily calm. No more warning letters. No more cars idling outside. For the first time since moving into Maplewood Estates, the silence actually felt peaceful, not watchful. But calm has a way of feeling temporary when you've lived under someone's thumb for so long. Every time I saw the mail truck stop at my box, I braced for another notice that never came. Every time I stepped outside, I half expected to see Karen's little white dog trotting down the sidewalk. But weeks passed and nothing. The county's investigation dragged on quietly in the background. Most people in the neighborhood tried to move on, repainting mailboxes, trimming hedges, repairing fences that had been long ignored during Karen's reign of control. It was almost like everyone was trying to erase the memory of how things had been. But not me. I couldn't just forget. Because for months, I'd lived in fear of an HOA president who had turned a quiet street into a personal kingdom. And I knew how easily that could happen again. So when the new interim committee asked me to help review the community bylaws, I said yes. I wasn't looking for power. I just wanted balance, fairness. We met in the clubhouse every Thursday night. It's the same space that used to echo with Karen's voice, now felt open, even lighthearted. People laughed again. Argued, sure, but honestly. There was something therapeutic about watching everyone relearn what it meant to be a community. I learned more than I ever wanted to know about how HOAs work, the loopholes, the unchecked authority, the lack of transparency. Karen hadn't created the system, she'd just mastered it. And that realization haunted me, because while Karen's name was now whispered with disgust, the system that enabled her was still there, waiting. A few months later, the county's final report came in. It was damning. Misuse of funds, falsified fines, harassment claims, all documented. Karen had been found guilty of violating multiple housing ordinances and was ordered to repay thousands in improperly collected fees. The report even mentioned potential criminal referral for fraudulent accounting practices. Word spread fast, faster than I expected. Local news picked up the story. HOA president accused of abusing power in suburban scandal. Reporters showed up on the street interviewing residents. And though I'd never sought the spotlight, I became the unintentional face of the rebellion. Neighbors thanked me. Some hugged me. One older man told me, "You didn't just save your yard, you saved all of us." It felt good, sure. But it also made me realize something bigger. This wasn't just about one yard or one HOA. It was about people standing up when something feels wrong, even when the rules are stacked against them. Still, victory has its costs. The whole ordeal had taken months, nearly a year, really, of constant stress, fines, and sleepless nights. My wife had almost begged me to let it go so many times. It's not worth it, she'd said more than once. And maybe she was right, and maybe it wasn't, not in the traditional sense. But looking around our street now at the kids playing on the sidewalks, the neighbors chatting without fear of being reported, I knew it was worth it. We'd taken back our neighborhood. Karen moved out not long after the report was finalized. One day her house just went dark, a for sale sign planted on the lawn she'd once ruled over like a queen. People whispered theories. Some said she'd left out of shame. Others claimed she'd been forced out after the board voted to ban her from holding any future HOA position. I didn't care why she left. I just cared that she did. The first weekend after her moving truck pulled away, I stood on my porch with a cup of coffee, looking across the street at her empty driveway. The silence was different now, peaceful, cleansing. For the first time in months, I felt ownership again, not just of my yard, but of my peace. That morning, I took down the last of the security cameras. Not because I felt untouchable, but because I didn't want to live like a prisoner anymore. I'd fought back. I'd survived. And I wasn't going to spend the rest of my time looking over my shoulder. A few weeks later, we held the first community event under the new HOA, a simple summer barbecue in the park. No speeches, no rules. No inspections, just food, laughter, and people finally acting like neighbors instead of suspects. As I stood by the grill flipping burgers, a woman I didn't recognize walked up. She'd just moved in, she said. She looked around the park, smiling. "This place feels so friendly," she said. "I've heard stories about HOAs being nightmares, but this seems different." I just smiled and nodded. "Yeah," I said quietly. "It's better now." She grinned, grabbed a soda, and wandered off to meet people. I watched her go, thinking about how she'd never know the mess this place used to be, how she'd never feel that tightness in her chest every time she checked her mail. And honestly, I was glad. She didn't need to know what it took to make it this way. But even as life settled back into normalcy, the lesson stayed with me. It's strange how easily control can creep into everyday life, how someone like Karen can wrap power around themselves like armor. It's convinced they're protecting standards while slowly strangling the joy out of a community. And it's even stranger how long it takes people to fight back. Most of my neighbors had lived under her rule for years before anyone spoke up. Some didn't want to get involved. Some were scared. And some just thought, it's not my problem, till it was. What started as a few petty fines had turned into full-blown corruption, all because no one wanted to make waves. I think about that a lot. Now, whenever I see a new notice or rule proposal, I read every line. I ask questions. I remind the committee and myself that rules are supposed to serve people, not control them. Because the moment you stop questioning authority, it stops serving you. One evening, months later, I got a message on my phone, a random number, no name. "Still keeping that grass perfect?" it read. I stared at it for a long time, unsure if it was Karen or someone playing a joke. For a second, that old anxiety crept back, that flicker of paranoia that someone might still be watching. But then I laughed, set the phone down, and walked out onto my lawn. The grass was green, clean, even, just the way I liked it. Not for the HOA, not for property values, but for me. And as I stood there, listening to the sprinklers hum softly in the twilight, I realized something simple but profound. Sometimes peace isn't the absence of conflict. It's the knowledge that when conflict comes again, and it always does, you'll know exactly how to stand your ground. The story of Maplewood Estates spread far beyond our little neighborhood. I started getting messages from people in other states, homeowners, tenants, even ex-HOA members, all sharing their own versions of the same story. Power, control, pettiness, revenge. Some asked for advice. Some just wanted to vent. But almost everyone said the same thing. I thought I was the only one. That's when I decided to share my experience more openly. To tell the story not just for entertainment, but as a reminder. Because this kind of thing doesn't just happen in one neighborhood. It happens everywhere. And maybe, if people hear enough stories like mine, they'll see the red flags before it's too late. Maybe they'll speak up sooner. Looking back, I don't regret what happened. Not the fights, not the fines, not even the stress. Because it taught me something most people never learn until it's too late. The biggest battles aren't fought over wars or politics. They're fought over the smallest things. A patch of grass, a mailbox, a rule someone swears is for the greater good. But those little things, they matter. Because they reveal who people really are when they're given power. And sometimes standing your ground even over a lawn is the most important stand you'll ever take. So, if you ever find yourself staring down a Karen with a clipboard, remember this. You're not powerless. You just need patience, proof, and persistence. Because when you fight smart, when you fight fair, the truth has a funny way of mowing down even the tallest, pettiest weeds. And trust me, watching them fall, that's a kind of peace you never forget. End. So, what do you think? Was Karen just drunk on power? Or do you think some people actually enjoy controlling others? Because stories like this, they aren't rare. They happen in quiet neighborhoods everywhere. Behind those perfect fences and HOA signs that promise community harmony. If this story made you angry, laugh, or just shake your head at the absurdity, you're exactly who this channel is for. Every week we dive into new real-life, HOA drama, neighborhood feuds, and unbelievable revenge stories that prove one thing: you can't script suburban chaos. So hit subscribe, tap that notification bell, and drop a comment below. Would you have fought back like this homeowner? Or just walked away? And if you've ever had your own HOA nightmare or Karen encounter, share it in the comments. Your story might be featured in a future episode. Because here on HOA Series, every lawn, every neighbor, and every petty rule hides a story worth telling. Until next time, stay smart, stay kind, and remember, sometimes the best revenge is just living peacefully on your own patch of grass.